Hi, this is Brian Forster, and today we are exploring what are called the tombs of the nobles at Aswan, which is in southern Egypt. It's not a location that most visitors go to because it requires a boat ride, though it's very close. It's just across the Nile River from the city of Aswan itself, which you can see in the background. And what's most intriguing about the tombs of the nobles are these very large rooms and passageways cut into the solid bedrock, which are quite curious. The standard story of the tombs of the nobles are that they were constructions during the Old and Middle Kingdoms of dynastic Egypt, for which there is a lot of evidence because you will see hieroglyphics and figures from dynastic Egypt. But the curious question is, who created the actual large rooms and passageways? Because they are quite huge. This is not an example of that. And very extensive. The material itself, according to our geologist Susan Moore, is a mudstone or siltstone, which is sedimentary, layered as you can see. It's not particularly hard, but it's the sense of scale that we're going to be looking at. Now, these locked doors are entrances to large rooms inside the bedrock, and fortunately not all of them were closed off. Some were opened for us, for which we're very thankful. So look at the flatness of that wall. Could that have been done with hand tools? Possibly. But again, it's the sense of scale which is quite incredible. And here we can see some knobs or protrusions coming out, what their original function was. I have no idea, but it's curious that we find protrusions like this also in Peru and Bolivia and Turkey and the third pyramid on the Giza Plateau. And now we're going to start entering some of these chambers. This is a relatively small one, and you can see the pillars inside, which of course are there to hold the ceiling up. If you tried to make the room without these vertical pillars, then it is quite probable that the ceiling would cave in, because again, the stone is not all that hard. Now we're going to enter one of the most spectacular of the inner workings at the tombs of the nobles. And you can see, again, the vertical pillars, which are relatively smooth and straight. And this goes in somewhere in the region of about 200 feet into the solid bedrock. So the probability that this was done with hand tools, I think, is highly unlikely. I think the dynastic people found these inner rooms and passageways and then utilized them for different purposes. For funerary purposes, of course, but also quite likely for other reasons as well. Now, when we look at the surfaces, you can see hand tool marks. But the question is, are these hand tool marks finishing work or refinishing work done by the dynastic people? Or are they the original tools, which I really doubt? Because how would you cut all of this stone out? We're talking hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of material with hand tools. Now here we see the obvious dynastic presence. You can see stucco there applied to the walls, and also, of course, sarcophagi-like figures, or Old Kingdom or Middle Kingdom effigies. Now that grate on the right is actually an entrance to another passageway that connects to other internal structures. Now we're back outside, and we're going to be visiting the farthest area in the tombs of the nobles. On the left-hand side, we see dynastic work, as in probably those pillars you see. There's a lot of reconstruction that's been going on. So we see Old Kingdom, we see New Kingdom, we see Greco-Roman, and we're also going to see the Christian or Coptic time period. But the actual art involved in that's applied to the walls is not of particular interest to me. I respect the dynastic works, of course, but it's simply the amount of engineering and effort required to remove all this material, which I find the most intriguing thing at the tombs of the nobles. So I'm not saying that it's impossible that this was done during dynastic times, but I am saying highly unlikely due to the sheer volume of work involved in this location, which is Aswan, which is relatively far away from the ancient centers of dynastic Egypt, as in the area of the Giza Plateau and Thebes, which are quite a bit farther to the north. There you see the striation patterns of the deposit of the mudstone or siltstone. And now we're going to go back to the other side where we get access once again to other chambers in this intriguing, flying plastic bag, intriguing place almost at the very southern point of present-day Egypt. Once again, as we look to the interior, somewhat rough work done, and not a very large chamber, but we will be exploring other ones which are much, much larger. This false door that you're looking at there in front is from the dynastic period. There you see a walled up door entry. And again, the amount of work it would have taken to flatten the wall on the right is considerable. And now we're going to go inside and explore another one of these very large internal spaces. Here you see some columns which are circular. And then curiously, as we proceed, all of a sudden they become rectangular or square. Personally, I believe that the square ones are the original ones and that the dynastic people reshaped some of the columns and made them round, because round columns is much more typical of the dynastic period. And then we see stucco applied with hieroglyphics carved into them. It's a lot easier to do that with a calcium carbonate based stucco than it is to carve into the bedrock itself. And here we have a broken pillar. When in the ancient past that happened, I'm not sure. Notice also the giant crack in the ceiling. It could be that these internal chambers are so ancient that they were victims of cataclysmic events somewhere in the region of 12,000 years ago, which is what we also see in places like the Giza Plateau and Saqqara, where we see obvious examples of lost ancient high technology that precede the dynastic people. And as we walk through again, these squared pillars, and then further along, the more typical dynastic round pillars. Again, I think it's an example of ancient recycling. So there, stucco applied to one of the squared columns with some crude hieroglyphs carved into them, or basically etched. And now we're going back outside and we're going to do some more exploration. Now this is from the Christian era, obviously. There you can see a damaged fresco. And next to it, more damaged frescoes. Some of this damage could be the result of earthquake activity possibly, or human incurred damage. You're now looking at the city of Aswan itself, which is a major port for the Nile cruise boats, which we do every year when we do our tour. We spend 4 days cruising down the Nile from Aswan. And here we have dynastic period, very fine work done in very fine limestone. Some of that is restoration. And these vertical square columns, which again are not typical of the dynastic time period. They're in a very finely carved internal space. Very flat surfaces on these vertical columns. And now we're going inside. And look at how well these internal surfaces have been shaped. A slightly domed ceiling, relatively flat walls, relatively straight as well. And again, this internal passageway goes in, I would say, about 100 feet into the bedrock itself. More hieroglyphics, as you can see. And now we're going to go back outside. We were able to access, I would say, approximately a quarter of the internal area at the tombs of the nobles. Some are still locked off because they're doing archaeological work. It's possible that some are locked off because they don't want the general public to see the extensive nature of these incredible internal spaces. And there you see from the Aswan city area, that is the tombs of the nobles in the background. So if you'd like to learn more about ancient Egyptian anomalies, my book here is available at Amazon.com.